Land of Dragons. Ancient China was one of the most advanced civilizations the world has ever known. For more of its 7,000-year history, lack of easy land or sea routes stopped travelers from other parts of the world from visiting China. This made China a prosperous and independent society. Life in ancient China was dominated by kings and emperors. A series of rulers from the same family was called a dynasty. Several dynasties governed China's enormous land and its large population of farmers, artisans, scholars, merchants, government officials, and slaves. China grew from a collection of small farming villages into large cities where markets and culture flourished. The ancient Chinese developed a system of writing so that people all over China could communicate with each other. Numerous inventions such as paper, printing, and a counting machine called the abacus improved the daily lives of the Chinese people. The inventions also helped spread trade and religious ideas across China. Many of ancient China's advances were adopted by peoples around the world and are used today. Shang Dynasty, 1766 BC to 1122 BC. Bronze coins first used in 2005 BC. Zhou Dynasty, 1122 BC to 770 BC. Letters and numbers used on oracle bones. Confucius, born in 551 BC. Spring and Autumn period, 770 BC to 476 BC. Great Wall of China begun by Emperor Xin. Warring States, 476 BC to 221 BC. What is a civilization? Most historians agree that a civilization is a group of people that shares common languages, some form of writing, advanced technology and science, and systems of government and religion. To protect ancient China from invaders from the north, China's first emperor built a large wooden barrier called the Long Wall. The wall was later rebuilt using bricks and became the Great Wall, which still stretches thousands of miles across China. Han Dynasty, 206 BC to 220 AD. New religion of Buddhism spreads through China. Jin Dynasty, 265 to 420. Fireworks invented. Wei Dynasty, 386 to 618. Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907. Empress Wu, China's only female ruler, born in 624. Song Dynasty, 960 to 1280. Kublai Khan meets European explorer Marco Polo in 1275. Middle Kingdom, Mongolia, Gobi Desert. Great Wall, Zhongdu, Beijing, Korea, Yellow Sea, Grand Canal, Luoyang, Xinjiang, Yellow River, Taklamakan Desert, Tibet, Himalayas, Yangtze River, Hangzhou, Yellow River, East China Sea, Yellow Sea, Liquid Taiwan, Guangzhou, South China Sea, Pacific Ocean, Bay of Bengal. China's geography and natural features were important factors in the growth of its civilization. China stretched across a large section of Central and Eastern Asia. Tall mountains, large deserts, and vast seas protected the people from invaders. Rivers created fertile farmland where the Chinese people grew crops and built houses, villages, and cities. Crucial rivers. Rivers were a source of life for the early peoples of China. Silt that flowed downstream fertilized the land on either side of the rivers and created rich soil that was ideal for farming. By about 5000 BC, the Yangshao peoples began settling in the northern Yellow River Valley. In the south, where the climate was warmer, settlements began along the Yangtze River. Over time, the Chinese began practicing agriculture and founded permanent villages along these rivers, using the water to irrigate crops. The abundance of crops helped village populations grow. The Chinese called their land Zhongguo, or the Middle Kingdom. They believed China was the center or middle of the universe. River of Sorrows. Heavy rains and melting snow in the mountains caused both the Yangtze and the Yellow Rivers to flood nearly every summer, allowing farmers to plant and irrigate extra crops. Sometimes the floods killed people and destroyed crops, leading to famine. The Yellow River was nicknamed the River of Sorrows because of the death it sometimes caused. Bamboo. In ancient China, southern forests were filled with bamboo trees. Bamboo was used for food, clothing, housing, and transportation. Books and most musical instruments were also made of bamboo. Daily life along the banks of the Yellow River is much the same today as it was thousands of years ago. Traveling through the Taklamakan Desert in western China was very dangerous. Taklamakan means enter and you shall never return. Sons of Heaven. The ancient Chinese people called their emperors sons of heaven because they believed the leaders were chosen by the gods. Emperors had many wives and many children. When an emperor died, his eldest son usually became emperor. Some Chinese dynasties lasted for hundreds of years. Emperors were China's supreme political, military, and religious leaders. Mandate of heaven. Emperors were expected to act in the best interest of the Chinese people. The Chinese believed that their ancestors in heaven brought prosperity and protection to them when an emperor was fair and just. If an emperor acted badly or was a poor military leader, the heavenly ancestors were thought to show their displeasure by sending earthquakes, floods, and droughts. The people took the natural disasters as a sign to rebel and replace the emperor. The Chinese people called this the mandate of heaven. Shang and Zhao dynasties. China's first known dynasties were founded by the Shang and Zhao peoples. The Shang had large armies with horse-drawn chariots and gained control of northern China around 1750 BC. Shang kings set up large cities and ruled for 600 years. The Zhao people came from the western border of the Shang kingdom and conquered the Shang. Through constant warfare, the Zhao made their kingdom larger and changed the way China was governed. Zhao kings allowed warriors or nobles to own land if they promised to fight for the king in the war. This made the nobles more powerful and the king weaker. Qin Shi Huangdi founded the Qin dynasty and was China's first emperor. The word China comes from the name Qin. Han dynasty. The Han dynasty was founded by a government official named Liao Bang in 206 BC. Over 400 years, the Han emperors expanded China's boundaries and brought peace and prosperity to the people. The Han dynasty organized a civil service to run the empire. The civil service was run by government officials who collected taxes, made sure laws were followed, and kept roads and canals in good shape. With people across China following the same laws, a common Chinese culture developed. Today, most Chinese think of themselves as descendants of the Han. After the Han dynasty ended, China's nobles fought each other for power. It took the strong leadership of Emperor Wendy's center to end the fighting and reunite China. Qin dynasty. In 221 BC, a ruler named Shi Huangdi came to power. Qin Shi Huangdi moved China's capital to Shenyang and forced nobles to move there with him. By keeping his nobles close to him, Qin Shi Huangdi was able to make sure they did not rebel against him. Qin Shi Huangdi made strict laws and taxed everyone in China. Anyone who opposed his laws was brutally punished. He ordered officials who protested against him to be thrown into a pit and burned alive. When Qin Shi Huangdi died, rebellions broke out and the Qin dynasty collapsed. Emperors ruled from a palace built in the center of China's capital city. The emperor wore fine silks in the royal color of yellow. The Sui dynasty. The Sui dynasty made many changes that strengthened China. Emperor Wendy brought smaller village leaders under his central control and established a census to count people. He also made punishments for lawbreaking the same in every part of the country. China became wealthy during the Sui dynasty, and Emperor Wendy reduced the amount of taxes people had to pay. When Wendy's son became emperor, he raised taxes and forced farmers to work on large construction projects such as the Grand Canal. This made the emperor unpopular and he was assassinated, bringing an end to the Sui dynasty. A large army protected every Chinese dynasty. During the Han dynasty, the army was made up of professional soldiers. They wore bronze armor, shields and helmets, high boots, and padded garments. This soldier carries a qiang, or spear. The Grand Canal was built during the Sui dynasty to link China's Yellow and Yangtze rivers. Boats used the canal to carry food and soldiers across the empire. Emperors forced one member from every family to work as laborers on the canal. The Tang dynasty. The Tang dynasty, which began in 618 AD, marked a period of great advancement in Chinese culture. This period is referred to as China's Golden Age. Great artistic achievements such as porcelain making were developed during the Tang dynasty. Porcelain was made by painting a bright blue dye on clay objects that were not yet dry. A clear glaze was then applied to the clay and it was fired in a kiln or large oven. Chinese artists began decorating porcelain with elaborate paintings that told the history of the Tang dynasty. Using their powerful armies, China expanded north to what is modern-day Korea, south to modern Vietnam, and west to India during the Tang dynasty. The collapse of the Tang dynasty in 906 AD brought disorder to China again. The Song dynasty. A military leader who became known as Taizhu founded the Song dynasty in 960 AD. Taizhu reformed the Chinese military and government so that people got jobs based on their skill instead of favoritism. The Song built sea-going ships called junks to take Chinese merchants to foreign lands. As trade increased, Chinese merchants became wealthy. Merchants spent money supporting artists, which made the Song era a great period of Chinese art. In the 1100s, most of the ruling Song family was put in prison when the Jin attacked from the north and established the Jin dynasty. A Song son fled south, where he began the southern Song dynasty in 1127 AD. Both the Jin and Southern Song were defeated by invading warriors called the Mongols. Empress Wu. China's first empress, Wu Chao, 624 to 705 AD, was one of many wives of Emperor Tang Gaozong. Wu came from a noble family and was known for her intelligence and beauty. She was also ruthless. Wu plotted to replace the emperor's favorite wife and grew very powerful by murdering her enemies. When the emperor died, Wu began ruling China. She built a new capital city, lowered taxes for peasants, and brought in scholars to run the government. Her rule ended when she was forced to step down in 705 AD. Soil and silk. The Chinese people depended on farming and trading. Over many years, China developed a network of routes across Asia to trade its crops and goods. The development of using coins as money made trade easier. Fertile river valleys. The Yellow and Yangtze rivers made China very good for farming. Most years, the rivers flooded and left a rich, fertile topsoil or silt on the surrounding land that made planting and growing easy. Chinese farmers also used the rivers to irrigate their fields. Farming. Most Chinese were peasant farmers who grew crops on small plots of land. All family members were expected to work on these farms, which grew crops such as millet, rice, and wheat for people in the army and in the cities. Farmers used simple wooden or stone tools, and most labor was done by hand. Farm animals were not common, so families often used their own waste as fertilizer. Painted clay pots were used to store this harvest. Chinese farmers used oxen and water buffalo to pull plows made of iron to till the soil. Peasants in southern China planted rice shoots in terraced rice paddy fields when they were flooded. The Silk Road. Antioch, Mediterranean Sea, Tyre, Palmyra, Syrian Desert, Red Sea, Persian Gulf, Persia or Iran, Ray, Caspian Sea, Aral Sea, Merv, Samarkand, Bactra, Khotan, Tashkent, Kashgar, Kucha, Plateau of Tibet, Dunhuang, Gobi Desert, Mongolia, Chang'an, China, Yellow Sea. The Chinese built a network of roads and canals to allow people to trade with each other. The most famous trade route was the Silk Road, which stretched from China across Asia to the Mediterranean Sea. Along the Silk Road, merchants traveled by camel across deserts to trade Chinese silk, tea, and spices for gold, silver, and precious stones from Central Asia. Money, money, money. The Chinese people used a system of coins or currency for buying goods as early as 2005. BC shells, knives, and silk were the earliest forms of currency. During the Qin dynasty, the emperor declared that coins should be standardized or worth the same amount in every part of China. A common currency made it easier for people to trade with each other. Bronze coins were made in many unusual shapes. Script and scholars. The ancient Chinese developed their own language and systems of writing and record keeping. Technical advances, such as the development of inks and paper, allowed the ancient Chinese to record history, keep track of time, and add and subtract numbers. Spoken language. Over hundreds of years, the spoken Chinese language went through several changes. During the Zhou dynasty, Old or Archaic Chinese was spoken. Not much is known about what Old Chinese sounded like. During the time of Sui, Tang, and Song dynasties, a new form of the Chinese language known as Middle Chinese was used. By 1000 AD, a number of different dialects or versions had emerged, many of which survive today. Before paper was available, bamboo was used to write on. Chinese characters were cut into thin strips of bamboo, beginning at the top. Writing without an alphabet. China does not have an alphabet that combines letters to form words like other languages. Chinese writing uses characters or symbols to represent words and ideas. There are about 40,000 Chinese characters, and each one can be made up of as many as 26 brushstrokes. To read a Chinese newspaper, a person might need to know about 3,000 of these characters. Most Chinese characters have changed very little since the Qin dynasty, when the emperor ordered that writing be standardized. Writing systems. Writing was first used in China for religious ceremonies. In 1400 BC, Shang religious leaders or priests carved questions to the gods on sheep bones and turtle shells. These bones became known as oracle bones. By about 400 BC, artisans began writing on bamboo strips, wooden tablets, and coated silk cloth using ink made from soot or charcoal mixed with water and glue. Writing usually described great historical events such as military battles or the rise of an emperor. government officials during the Qin dynasty introduced a standardized form of writing across China to ensure that educated people understood the emperor's commands. Most people in ancient China did not know how to write. Educated men studied to become scribes. Scribes copied important papers and books for the emperor. Shang priests put questions on oracle bones and then looked for answers in cracks made when the bones were heated. Ancient calculators. The ancient Chinese called mathematics Suan-chu, or the art of calculation. Number symbols found on oracle bones from the Shang dynasty date back 3,400 years. Chinese numbers are based on the decimal system, or the number 10, just as most number systems are today. The ancient Chinese used mathematics for many purposes, such as building construction, flood control, and to calculate sums for trading goods. The Chinese calendar. Mathematics was used to develop the Chinese calendar. The ancient Chinese divided each year into 12 months. Unlike other calendars that are based on the cycles of the sun, the Chinese calendar is based on the cycles of the moon. One full lunar phase of 28 days represents a month. The cycles of the moon are different from the cycles of the sun, so Chinese New Year happens each year between late January and early February instead of on January 1st. The signs used for the numbers 1 through 9 during the Shang dynasty are shown above. The Chinese invented the abacus, a counting scale that used rods and sliding beads. The abacus is still used in some parts of China. Top. The art of Tai Chi may be based on the natural world. Some people believe Tai Chi was developed by a priest who copied the movements of a white crane preying on a snake. Once used for fighting, Tai Chi evolved into a gentle form of exercise practiced by people of all ages. Public education. Education became very important during the Han Dynasty. Around 100 BC, Emperor Wudi agreed with the great Chinese thinker Confucius that the key to good government depended on education. Wudi started a system of public schools for boys in every part of China that taught the ideas of Confucius. In the capital of China, there was a major school called the Grand School. The Grand School started out with only 50 students, but within 100 years it had more than 30,000 students. The Chinese Zodiac. The ancient Chinese developed a system for keeping track of the years using 12 different animals. According to a legend, the zodiac originated with Buddhism. The Buddha called all the animals of China to his bedside, but only 12 came. To honor the animals for coming, he created a year for each one. Each animal has its own characteristics. Some Chinese believe that people born in a certain year will have the characteristics of that year's animal. A person born in the year 1995 was born in the Chinese year of the pig and would be caring and determined. Can you find the name of the year in which you were born according to the Chinese calendar? Kings and peasants. China's people were divided into groups called social classes based on birth, wealth, and the kind of work they did. These social classes were the basis of Chinese society. Everything from where people lived to what they ate and wore depended on their social class. Cooking classes. In northern China, boiled noodles, soybeans, and baked breads were common foods. In the south, where farmers planted large, rich fields, boiled rice was the main dish, and fresh fruit and seafood were also common. In the western mountains, people flavored their food with hot peppers and other spices. Wealthier Chinese often ate meats such as pork, lamb, duck, and pigeon, and for special feasts, snakes, dogs, or bear claws. Most Chinese ate 2 meals a day. The first meal was at mid-morning and the other came before nightfall. The most important item in the Chinese kitchen was the stove, which burned wood to heat the food. Dress codes. The clothing, hats, and jewelry worn by a Chinese person showed what position that person had in society. Wealthy people usually wore expensive silk, while peasants wore long shirt-like clothing made of hemp, a fabric woven from plant fiber. Men almost always wore hats when they went out in public. Noble women usually wore their long hair in top knots that were held together with hairpins. This pottery figure dates back to the Tang Dynasty. It shows the types of clothing wealthy government officials wore. Royal Palace. The emperor's family and their servants. The emperor is surrounded by government officials. Nobles and wealthy Chinese. Laborers repairing the great steps. Social classes. At the top of ancient Chinese society were the ruling dynasties, which included the emperor, his wives and concubines, and their immediate families. Members of a dynasty were believed to have been chosen by the spirits of heaven and earth to rule, and were treated like gods by the people. A large group of royal officials or bureaucrats ran the government on a day-to-day basis. Most work, such as farming, building houses, and maintaining roads and canals, was done by farmers. Villages and cities. Across ancient China, most people lived in small villages. During the Shang dynasty, larger cities were founded where emperors, their families, and other government officials lived. Cities became centers of industry, trade, and religion. Chang'an, the capital city during the Han dynasty, was home to more than 1 million people. Number 1. The small wild goose pagoda in the Chang'an was built between 707 AD and 710 AD. The pagoda originally had a temple on top. 2. Wealthy Chinese families lived in groups of houses facing each other with common courtyards. 3. Chang'an was divided into districts, each separated by its own walls and entrances. Wealthier citizens lived in the north, while poorer people lived in the city's south. Number 4. A great outer wall protected Chang'an from invaders. The wall still stands today. Number 5. Most Chinese lived in small villages on the outskirts of cities. Houses were usually made of wood covered with a plaster of mud. Villages had central meeting places and areas such as underground pits where grain and other food was stored. Religion and beliefs. Ancient Chinese religion and philosophy were based around 4 different belief systems or ways of thinking. These were ancestor worship, Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. Most ancient Chinese followed ideas contained in one of these systems. Ancestor worship. Family was at the center of ancient Chinese society. Family included all current relatives, ancestors from the past, as well as from future generations. Respect for past generations was so important that many people prayed to the spirits of their ancestors for help and guidance. In most ancient Chinese homes, there was an altar where offerings could be made to dead relatives. The family name was very important to the ancient Chinese. The family name was carried on only through the male members of the family, so people felt it was important to have sons as heirs. Confucianism. Confucius was a scholar who lived from 551 BC to 479 BC. Confucius was born into a wealthy family, but war caused his family to become poor. To improve himself, Confucius began to study. He became one of the wisest men in China. Confucius developed a system of rules of behavior. The rules stated that sons owed loyalty to fathers, wives owed loyalty to husbands, and young brothers owed loyalty to older brothers. Confucius believed that if these rules were followed, Chinese society would be more peaceful. Just as a father was responsible for caring for his family, Confucius believed the emperor was responsible for treating his subjects wisely and fairly. Confucius thought children should obey their elders and the Chinese people should obey their emperor. Confucius was known as the master. His teachings are in a book called the Analects. Many Buddhist temples were built as places of prayer. Buddhism. Buddhism is based on the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, who became known as the Buddha, or Enlightened One. Gautama became saddened by the suffering in the world and decided to go on a journey from his home in India. Gautama felt that he had found the meaning of life after meditating near a tree. Followers of Buddha, called Buddhists, believe that people suffer because they want things and they will only be happy once they stop wanting things. Buddhism spread through China between 1 AD and 100 AD. The Buddha taught that people could be born again or reincarnated many times. Taoism. Between 600 and 500 BC, a way of thinking known as Taoism developed in China. Taoism is based on the Tao Te Ching, a book written by a teacher named Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu taught the importance of harmony with nature and that achieving a balance of the forces of yin and yang is the key to spiritual peace. Lao Tzu created Taoism to end the constant fighting in Chinese society. Tzu believed fighting was a sign that yin and yang were out of the balance. In 440 AD, the emperor declared Taoism a national religion. From then on, Lao Tzu was honored as a god. The Tao operates by balancing yin and yang, the opposing forces in the universe. Arts and culture. Every educated person in ancient China was expected to practice the 4 arts of music, calligraphy, chess, and brush painting. The ancient Chinese love of the arts spread to include works created by professional artists, musicians, and scribes employed by the emperor. Music. Ancient Chinese music, or qin, was played at banquets, ceremonies, and in the court of the emperor and other nobles. Musical instruments such as the Chinese flute or chow date back 9,000 years. The Chinese lute or pipa was sometimes played by noble women at court. During solemn occasions such as funerals, musicians played bells. Calligraphy. Calligraphy, or shu, is the Chinese art of depicting written characters on paper. Poets were often calligraphers who illustrated their poems using the fancy writing. Calligraphers used brushes made from animal hair tied with silk and fastened into bamboo tubes. Ink was made by rubbing drops of water on a solid inkstone formed from burned pine soot and gum. It took many years to learn the art of calligraphy. Chinese chess. Chinese chess was called qi. It is based on a game from India called Chanturanga, which may have been brought to China by Buddhist missionaries. The game board is set up to represent two enemy countries that are separated by a river. Players move pieces along the lines on the board in an attempt to capture their opponent's king. Calligraphy conveys a word's meaning attractively. The word above is harmony. A musician plays the guqin, a Chinese zither with 25 strings. Brush painting. The Chinese art of brush painting, or hua, dates back at least 6,000 years. Painting was originally done to decorate pottery or bronze statues. After Buddhism arrived in China, painting took on a religious role. Painted religious murals were found in carved grottos or caves, as well as in Buddhist temples. By 300 AD, artists began painting beautiful landscape paintings that were not realistic, but expressed the artist's emotions using soft colors. By the time of the Song Dynasty, 960 to 1280 AD, people and stories from everyday life had become popular subjects for painting. Jade stone was carved with bronze-tipped drills. Wood and leather polishing wheels were used to make it shine. Artisans. Many artisans in ancient China created works of art from bronze, jade, and clay. Bronze was made by combining copper and tin. Metal workers poured molten or hot liquid bronze into ceramic molds. When the bronze cooled, the mold was broken to reveal works of art such as statues, vases, and drinking vessels. The Chinese also used a form of baked clay called terracotta to fashion sculptures and figures. Kung Fu. Another art that came to China after Buddhism arrived is the martial or military art known as Kung Fu. Kung Fu is based on the idea that physical health consists of both inner and outer strength. While physical exercises kept the outer body strong, breathing exercises were meant to help give fuel to the body's inner organs. By the 1200s, Kung Fu had spread across Asia. As Chinese Kung Fu spread, it developed into karate in Japan and into Taekwondo in Korea. The Great Wall. Ancient China's greatest legacy is the Great Wall. This huge wall, which measures 2,150 miles, or 3,460 kilometers, was built by Qin Shi Huangdi to protect his kingdom from tribes to the north who threatened to invade China. Number 1. The Great Wall was built with many towers where Chinese soldiers took up posts to watch for invaders. Soldiers signaled from tower to tower using flags, fires, and drums. Number 2. The inside of the Great Wall is made of soil and rubble. The earliest wall was made of wood, but during the Ming Dynasty, the walls were covered with bricks and a road paved on top. Number 3. Most of the difficult work in building the Great Wall was done by peasant farmers and captured criminals. Workers who died during construction were buried inside the wall. Number 4. The Great Wall was built using materials that were found nearby, including stones from the mountains, timber from the forests, and earth, sand, and pebbles from the desert. Number 5. The Great Wall was built by joining together a series of earlier, smaller walls. Today, the Great Wall of China is the largest human-made structure in the world. Amazing inventions. The ancient Chinese were great inventors. They invented tools that improved their lives, medical procedures to improve their health, and weapons for war. Paper. The invention of paper made it possible to record China's history. The ancient Chinese made paper by dipping a bamboo screen into a mix of crushed or pulped tree bark, rags, and plant pieces. As a thin layer of pulp dried on the screen, it hardened into a sheet of paper. According to legend, paper was first presented to the emperor in 105 AD by a government official named Cao Lun. But it is believed that paper was used in China at least 200 years earlier. Wealthier Chinese used paper for writing. The Chinese also used paper to make inventions such as raincoats, umbrellas, and children's kites. Printing. Printing requires paper, ink, and a surface carved with letters or other symbols. Chinese monks developed a method of printing using marble pillars. They applied wet paper to carve sections of the pillars, which were coated in ink. The words carved on the pillars transferred to the paper. By about 1000 AD, an inventor named Pi Sheng had created a system of movable type that used blocks of clay to represent each of the 40,000 Chinese characters. The Chinese made paper out of strips of silk and bamboo. Pulp for paper was later made from bark, hemp, and worn-out nets. Gunpowder. The Chinese invented gunpowder by mistake. Chemists were mixing two chemical compounds, sulfur and nitrate, to make a potion that would allow the emperor to live forever. Instead, it caused explosions. By the time of the Tang Dynasty, the Chinese were using gunpowder, which they called huiyao in war. Chinese medicine. Ancient Chinese medicine was closely tied to Taoism and was concerned with keeping people healthy instead of curing illness. The Chinese believed that a person became sick when yin and yang were out of balance. Chinese doctors worked to keep yin and yang in balance by using herbal cures and treatments such as acupuncture. To perform acupuncture, ancient Chinese doctors applied small needles to certain spots on the body called meridians, where they believed life-giving energy flowed. The acupuncture needles eased pain caused by certain illnesses. The Chinese used gunpowder to make fireworks. Fireworks were first used in fire rockets, which were ignited in battle to confuse enemies. Other inventions. The ancient Chinese also invented the magnetic compass to tell which direction is north. The wheelbarrow was invented to help with construction. The stirrup was invented to make horseback riding easier. All of these inventions continue to be used around the world. Making silk. Silk was a rare and valued fabric that ancient Chinese traded with other peoples. Large-scale silk production began as early as the Zhou dynasty. To make silk, the Chinese fed mulberry leaves to caterpillars. When the caterpillars wove cocoons, silk makers boiled the cocoons to loosen the fibers. Then they reeled in the fiber to produce silk, as shown in the illustration. Enduring China. In 1206, people from the north called the Mongols became the first foreign rulers of China. Later, when the Manchu invaded, China's traditions continued to survive. Today, almost 100 years after the rule of the last emperor, Chinese civilization continues to influence the world. The Mongol invasion. The area north of China, known as Mongolia, was controlled by the Mongol people. In 1206, a great ruler named Genghis Khan united all Mongol peoples across Asia and captured northern China. His grandson, Kublai Khan, became the emperor of China in 1260. By 1279, he had conquered southern China and founded the Yuan dynasty. The Mongols did not trust the educated members of Chinese society and did not believe in the teachings of Confucius. The Mongols ended the exam system, which generations of noble Chinese had passed to become government officials. Genghis Khan, the fierce leader of the Mongols. Huan, Ming, and Qing dynasty emperors ruled from Beijing's Forbidden City, which still stands in Tiananmen Square. Common people were not allowed into the Forbidden City. Contact with Europeans. The Mongols opened China to greater trade with the rest of the world. In 1275, an Italian explorer named Marco Polo visited Kublai Khan. Marco Polo was amazed by the beautiful artwork and crafts made by Chinese artisans and by China's many scientific and cultural advances. He carried word of China's civilization back to Europe. Many Chinese resented the Mongol rulers. After about 90 years of Yuan dynasty rule, a Buddhist named Ming Tai Su organized an army that forced the Mongols from China. Ming Tai Su then took the throne as the first ruler of the Ming dynasty. Exploration. During the Ming dynasty, Chinese ships sailed the oceans to explore lands far beyond their shores. In the 1400s, a fleet of huge Chinese ships visited Southeast Asia, India, Arabia, and East Africa. Chinese explorers were not interested in founding colonies, so little is known about their journeys. Modern China. In 1644, the Manchu and other people from the north invaded China. The Manchu began the Qing dynasty, which lasted until 1912. The Manchu demanded loyalty. Books criticizing the dynasty were destroyed, and many Chinese were forced to shave their heads and wear a single long braid to show obedience to the emperor. The Manchu closed off trade with other countries and banned foreign ships from China's harbors. These actions weakened China's economy. By 1908, the last emperor, Puyi, came to the throne as just a young boy. 4 years later, the Chinese leader Sun Yat-sen declared China a republic, and Puyi gave up the throne. Today, China is a communist country. Puyi, the last emperor of China, was a young boy when he came to power.